Hi everyone, welcome to session 22 of Living is Dying, Zen and the Art of Dying. I'm Zangmo, the host for this session, and I'm part of the Living is Dying presentation team. Nicolette and Shempen are the tech support for today. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia or wherever you're practicing from. We recognise their connection to land, waters and culture, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. So we've covered quite a lot in the 21 weeks to date, exploring Dzongdzar Khyentse Rinpoche's instructions on how to prepare for dying, death and beyond. There's been a variety of guest speakers who've helped us with the content of the book, bringing it to life for us as a group and also individually. We've been exploring as Buddhist practitioners, but also as people who support family and friends who may have different beliefs, and we need to know how to be with them as well. Before I introduce our guest speaker, Zenith Virago, I'd like us to recite together Milarepa's 8 Things to Remember. So we're going to screen share that for you. Eight things to remember. At the moment you are fond of large estate sites. You surround yourself with a manor and its grounds. But when your time to go has come, you'll have to leave it behind like an empty shell. Are you aware that this is what will happen? You do well to remember and keep it well in mind. At the moment you are fond of fame and fortune. You surround yourself with power and pomp. But when your time to go has come, who will you turn to? Not a refuge in this sorry world for you. Are you aware that this is what will happen? You do well to remember and keep it well in mind. At the moment you are fond of family relations. You surround yourself with relatives and friends. But when your time to go has come, you'll have to leave them, kin and dear ones, every last one. Are you aware that this is what will happen? You do well to remember and keep it well in mind. At the moment you like admirers and helpers. You surround yourself with children and good things. But when your time to go has come, you'll leave without them. Empty-handed and stark naked you'll depart. Are you aware that this is what will happen? You do well to remember and keep it well in mind. At the moment you are fond of material comforts. You surround yourself with the status of success. But when your time to go has come, your body will fail you. Then it's fit for nothing more than to be put in the ground. Are you aware that this is what will happen? You do well to remember and keep it well in mind. At the moment you are fond of your good conditions. Your faculties work and your physical state is fine. But when your time to go has come, it's another story. You no longer have any power over your mind. Are you aware that this is what will happen? You do well to remember and keep it well in mind. At the moment you are fond of the palate's pleasures. You surround yourself with delicious food to eat. But when your time to go has come, your appetite dwindles. You won't even manage to get a little water down. Are you aware that this is what will happen? You do well to remember and keep it well in mind. By keeping this in mind, I practice Dharma. I know the bliss of having no worldly goods. This melody on 8 things to remember, sung at the Karakachi Inn in Sung, composed by I, the yogi, Milarepa. May it give you the boost you need to practice well. So as Rinpoche pointed out earlier in the book, these reminders are not meant to encourage us to stop what we are doing and head off to the mountains. more that we start to explore and acknowledge the truth that we are all dying and we need to make the most of our lives and live fully. Facing death helps us appreciate what it is like to be alive, and being prepared supports us to be able to let go. This session, Zen and the Art of Dying, is an extension of last week, How to Be with the Dying, and also relates to caring for the dying and the dead. It overlaps with many underpinnings of Rinpoche's book. And we will be having an opportunity for questions and answers towards the end, so you can put your questions in the chat. So I'm just going to spotlight Zenith, so she's here with me. Fantastic. Beautiful. I hope we're next to each other. Looking good. So welcome, Zenith. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
It's wonderful. I'm just going to read your bio as part of the introduction. Zenith, known as a death walker, an educator and a celebrant, is a maverick pioneer of a more contemporary, holistic death style. Her approach supports dying well, family-led body care, meaningful and appropriate ceremony. Blending traditional and contemporary understanding, Zenith encourages people to take their dying, death, and after-death care and ceremony back into their own hands and hearts, even in cases of sudden death and trauma. With a legal and community background, Zenith is seen as a community resource, assisting people to know and reclaim their legal rights and to co-create their own social rites of passage. For over 25 years, she has been influencing holistic cultural changes in approaches to better end of life and after-death care. She shares the subtle and obvious layers involved to support people to be as informed, open, and courageous as they can be, and to experience their dying and loss in the best way possible. Her work may best be summed up in assisting people to die well, and for those left behind to have a healthier bereavement as they move into their healing with no or few regrets. Feminist, dyke, swimmer and liver of life, Zenith lives in Byron and was Byron's Citizen of the Year in 2021. She speaks and teaches in Australia and internationally, is the founding member of the Natural Death Care Centre New South Wales, co-author of the book The Intimacy of Death and Dying, subject of the international independent documentary Zen and the Art of Dying, patron of the Good Funeral Guide, UK. And Zenith also received teachings from Zonzo Khyentse Rinpoche when he first came to Australia. So I'm sure there's plenty of people here from up north that have met you before. So
Yes.
familiar faces.
Yeah, it's so lovely for me to look out and see people I know. It's beautiful.
Oh, gorgeous. So I know we've only just said hello, but we want to start with a couple of minutes of the I've forgotten the name of it, but we're going to show some footage. Thanks, Nicolette.
And just if we could ask people to increase the volume. Unfortunately, the volume of the video isn't very strong, so people may have to put their volume up just for the video. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Zenith Virago, and we're welcoming you to the 6th annual Day of the Dead picnic in the park. So when we say the phrase, the Day of the Dead, we often think of Mexico, of South America, and the very mention of the name conjures colour and music, coming together in cemeteries with flowers and mementos and gifts and food and drink. So this is what we're doing here. We're taking small but powerful steps towards cultural change. We are establishing for ourselves and for our children a better, more natural and supportive way to do death and loss.
The wise, the willing and the wonderful Tammin Sefton Collins, my son. I don't miss my son anymore in that same way of just wanting him back. Yeah. Children can't speak about, you know, a dead brother or sister at school or really to their friends. You know, my daughter, she was a bit distracted with her friends today, but I saw her, you know, she wanted to come up to that microphone.
My brother.
You know, there's something about the public nature of speaking, you know, speaking the name, speaking the experience.
My mother, Jennifer Harker, the goddess of weather.
My lovely mother, Lila Berg.
My loving brother, Craig Ferguson.
My dad, Robert.
Our beautiful angel, Jyoti.
My father, Johan Heinrich Wichen. My dad, Terry McGowan.
A beautiful fun friend, Estelle Myers.
My daughter, Chelsea Dawn Morningstar.
Big Phil, my rock and roll uncle.
My mate, Simon.
My dear Ross.
My grandfather, Eric.
My uncle Howard and Mary.
To my guide dog, Victor, who guided me through life.
You're all hanging on to each other and your fingers are out and you're going to touch the earth and we're all going to shout out one thing together. What is it? Well, it could either be life or it could be love. What do you reckon? Love?
Well, thank you. Every time I watch that, I find it so uplifting. Can you say something about how that tradition came about for you in Byron and what it means to people, Zenith?
Yes, it's just an annual event that we put on. It's not aligned to any religion or philosophy or tradition in that way. For example, people think about the Day of the Dead in Mexico and South America. I just saw that what we really needed was something different to trashy Halloween, which was what most kids were getting to learn about death, which, as we know, it's pretty trash. And the only other thing they got was the rawness of the funeral. So it was a way to bring children into that death awareness in a fun, sort of easier way, but also in a quite a deep, serious, sensitive way. And it's absolutely worked for that. You know, a lot of those kids are now watching that. They're young adults and they won't settle for less. You know, they have that familiarity and they'll know that there's a different way to do things.
So good. And we're not going to watch the end, but can you say what happens at the end? So I know you leave things there for the fortnight, and then what's the process for dismantling everything?
Yeah, so I just usually go after 2 weeks and I take everything that is the string, the messages, everything that people have left. I burn all of those just in the roots of the tree, and sometimes there's raw clay that you could see people making little things out of, and we just push those into the crevice in the tree. There are quite a few crevices so that they can just return to the earth. But what we did find is the council said, you know, you can't leave your rubbish there, they said. I was outraged, of course, because I said, this isn't rubbish, this is meaningful for people. And we left it there for 2 weeks every year and no one touched it. No one destroyed it. It only got added to. during those 2 weeks, people who were walking through the park brought more. They brought their people to the tree.
Yeah, so wonderful. I want to visit the tree next time I'm in Byron. I'm quite inspired to go to the tree. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this 25 years of work. Yeah, I don't know whether you call it work or what you call it, but yeah, how you got involved in the whole death and dying scene.
Well, it wasn't something I was looking at doing for a second. And I'm looking at Christina, who I've known, my first friends on the North Coast when I moved here. And she will know that I was a very different person then. I was, hey, Johnny. I wasn't like this at all. Death has really polished me into something that I couldn't have imagined was possible. But really, I just said yes when death invited me to step up when a friend of ours died. And she died suddenly, and we didn't want to give her to strangers to look after her body. And she was a Buddhist. She was a practicing Buddhist. Her name was Sylvia. And so I just thought, well, we can do this ourselves. We don't need to give her to strangers. And I was very fortunate that I went to a funeral director who explained to me everything I needed to know, extraordinarily generous. And then we did it ourselves. We built the coffin, we washed and dressed her, we took her home from the hospital, we sat vigil with her children, we drove her in our own car, we created a ceremony at the crematorium outside. We pushed her coffin into the cremator ourselves. And at the end of that day, we felt, even though we were still in shock from her death and we were sad that she had died because we loved her, we felt very satisfied with what we'd done in order to send her off well. And we had no regrets about that process. And then other people asked me to do that for them, and it just really had a life of its own. But I'm a great believer in, the more you practice something, the better at it you get. So the more you practice saying, oh no, I can't do that, someone else needs to do that, the better at that you'll get. Whereas if you say, yes, okay, I'll give it a go, and because you're never alone, you're always working as a team, other people will step up to help you, and you're already a community. So, you have each other to support you. But, if it comes knocking at your door, if death comes calling for you, either for yourself to die or to care for the dying or the dead, when someone's died suddenly, then I really encourage you to step up to that mark and to be as present as you can to that.
Thank you. Fantastic. In May, I did the Death Walker training with Zenith, which was fantastic. And so a number of the questions or references I've got relate to some of that training. One of the things that we went over was language and the use of language and how to rephrase some of the terms, or reframe, I should say, some of the terms that are commonly used. Can you speak to that a little and the importance of that? Because I've reflected on that a lot since, and I am trying to work with my own language and just picking a few words at a time to do it. So I found it really useful.
I can, but can I mess with your order, order of things?
Please.
Great. So when I spoke with Zhang Mo, because she had done the training, she asked me if I would speak to maybe 4 of the beginning significant things. But when I looked at them, I put them into a different order, which I think is more beneficial for you. And so before I begin, I just want to say I'm bringing full respect to, to everyone's beliefs and faiths, and full respect to everybody's experience, because I know that there are many of you who have had lots of experience, others who have had no experience with death or dying. So maybe this will validate or affirm for you what you already know, but for others it might be helpful. So that's my starting point, and I'm offering it. And I don't come alone. So I come with all the people that I've worked with. We all come to offer you this. I'm just the last one standing, But, you know, if they hadn't have been so incredibly courageous and wanting to do their dying and their death as well as they could, I wouldn't be sitting here as a body of knowledge to share it with you. So I just, you know, want to honor that before I begin. So my experience tells me, which is now, you know, like a long 35 years worth of experience, it tells me that there's an equation for every death, and it looks like this. So it's who the person is, how they've lived and how they've died, plus who you are, your familiarity with death, and your relationship to that person. And those two parts of that equation will give you a response. And that response will be different every time. So, for, you know, it's not rocket science, but it's just good to think about it in that way, because sometimes people think, oh, I'm getting great with death, you know, I'm managing really well. And then someone will die, the circumstances or that relationship will just, you know, knock you for six, and you're surprised at that. So just know that each death that you're involved with, or you hear about, or you work with, will have a different equation, and it's your response to that death that you are working with. So that's, you know, a fundamental starting point for people. The second part is about the principles that I work with, that I have learned from that work and from being with those people. And they're pretty simple. There's sort of 5. So is to be present, whatever present looks like for you, but to be neutral. And neutral doesn't mean cold or unfeeling or uncaring. It means you're neither judging it as good or bad, or terrible, or, oh, well, they'd had a good innings, that fabulous line that people say when people are old and they've lived a long time. So coming neutral is very useful, and I'll explain that a bit more. Then I come kind, because as you know, if it's good enough for the Dalai Lama, it's good enough for all of us. So when he says, you know, my religion is simple, my religion is kindness, I just think, what's the kind thing to do here? And sometimes it's to say nothing, sometimes it's to respond in whatever way it is. I'm present, I'm neutral, but I'm kind. And then with those 3 things that I'm embodying, I respond to what's in front of me. So even though I come with a toolkit, I come with a wealth of experience, I say to people, what do you want from me? Or what can I do for you? How can I help you? How can I be of assistance? And I let them tell me what they want from me. Because if you assume something, it may not be what their needs are. And you might have to wait for that, but just wait. You know, you're accompanying them in their dying. So you're in service to their dying. It's sort of simple, but anyway. So, and from there, so for example, I had to grow kindness. I wouldn't have said I was a particularly kind person. I was a regularly kind person, but I've become very kind in my way of being with people, not being so direct, not being so forthright, not being so chop, let's get on with this. I had to grow kindness. But what a lot of people need to grow is courage. And as some of you will know, courage comes from the word core, which is from the heart. So it's not, you know, it's not about being brave. That's something different. It's about being courageous. It's about coming with your heart into that situation that may or may not be challenging. So present, neutral, kind, responding, and if you need to, growing courage or growing vulnerability, because vulnerability and courage are actually exactly the same. So I'm not going to elaborate on that. I'm just going to leave you there with that. So now I'm going to speak about language, which was what you wanted to, but I just wanted to give a little foundation or a little bit of depth before we begin the language. So so I'm not going to do all that we cover in the death walking training because it's quite a lot, but I'm just going to cherry pick some of it which may be helpful to you. So one of the things is when people say I'm afraid of dying, or I've got fears around dying, I immediately reframe that back and say, what part of dying are you concerned about? Mm-hmm. So I'm dissolving fear into concern because it's already, reducing, dissolving the intensity of that. So, because we can be concerned that how we will behave if we win the lotto. It's it's not so intense as fear. Because as we know, fear can be paralyzing, and that's not helpful in these situations. Because especially if you are the first person on the scene of a car accident, for example, and you're with someone who's dying on the side of the road, so you really want to be present to them. You really want to do whatever the kind thing is, and you don't want to be you want to be neutral because you do not want to bring your fears and your concerns and your panic and your what do I do now? What do I do now? You be present to that person. It's if they're going to die in a minute's time, the fact that you are there giving them love and kindness will be of great comfort to them, but it will also be of great comfort to their family to know, because one of the greatest concerns people have is that people don't die alone. It's a big thing, but for example, people like me will be very happy to die alone because I will be busy dying. I won't want to be distracted. I haven't spent 35 years at bedsides to miss my own dying. And I hazard a guess, some of you who have been practicing Buddhist for a long time, and by then it will be a lifetime when you're looking at death, however long that might be, I doubt if you'll want to miss that either, because especially if you're doing the power practice and you're sending your consciousness up and out, but you're pulling it back. But in that dying, you'll be sending it out and not pulling it back. So you'll be very present to that. And if you can do that for someone else, that can be great. Not the Tonglen, but a kindness practice. So I've gone off on a tangent there. I'm going to come back. So dissolving fear or afraid into concerns. The concept of a good death. So if you've got a good death, then what else have you got? You've got a bad death. And so I use the phrase dying well. And I'm assisting people to die as well as they can, whatever that looks like for them, because it looks very different for different people. Mm-hmm. And it's no good going in with some what it should be. You have to be with what is, not what if, or if only. People can only do it as well as they can. And that might just be a little squeeze of the hand. It might be an embrace. It might be telling someone the words they've never spoken. They might say they're sorry. They might say, I love you. And men in particular often wait their whole life for their father to tell them that they love them and they're proud of the man they've become. And sometimes on someone's deathbed, they're able to say something that life has not allowed them to say. So dying well, up to you what you do, I don't care. The concept of a celebration, which is bandied about all the time, would really change that to ceremony, because sometimes it's like poking someone with a stick, that because they don't feel like celebrating. They may want to celebrate their life, but they they have to get to that. So if you just use the term ceremony, it's much more neutral. It's much kinder for them. And then it can go wherever it needs to go. But it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure to have a good death on the dying person. And it's a lot of pressure to have a celebration for the family, especially when they're still caught in their sadness at that person's death. So these are more neutral terms. I generally don't use the word grief unless I really mean it. I don't use it as a blanket term for people who are someone they love has died. I call them bereaved people rather than grieving people, and the reason I do that is because sometimes, some people will say grief can look like anything. It sort of can, but we also, if you had a scale and neutral was in the middle, most people would see grief, as a not such a great thing, painful, let's say, a painful experience, emotionally, physically, whatever. So, but bereavement for me and bereaved people is a much more respectful term, because sometimes when because I come neutral, it's my experience at the kitchen table with families that I don't know anything about them. I just come because they've invited me. And I say, my mum's died, my dad's died, will you come? I get there, hi, how are you? Sit down. And I say, how is that death for you? And they will say sometimes, you know what, Zenith, we're glad they've gone. We're glad they've died. They were mean and nasty to us. And sometimes they say worse than that. And so if I come in with my blanket of, oh, those poor grieving people, and I'm sort of patronize them or matronize them in my assumption that they're going to be grieving and it's terrible, there's no space for them to just neutrally say that it's okay. Not only is it okay, they're actually glad that person's died. And that can also be when they love someone, but that person has been suffering for months, weeks, years, and especially when someone's had dementia for years, and they already feel that person is lost to them, and they've been through a whole process of loss and of grief, and so they almost, they're like, it's like breathing out. It's sort of like, oh, thank goodness they've gone. And some of you may know that feeling for yourselves, or have been in those situations with people, because sometimes people are reluctant to say that they're okay because everybody wants to smother them with their care. And so you want to come to them and respond to what is in front of you, who is in front of you. It's their experience. You are just accompanying them in that. So don't assume that they're in grief, because the other thing is some people go to joy when someone dies, and some of you may know that. There's too many of you to raise your hands if you felt that, but generally what happens is, if people know that feeling, it's spontaneously arising, and at the very thought of that person, they're overwhelmed with joy and smiling. And even though they've died, they're somehow that's just a part of it, but because they go to love, they expand in their love for that person, and they don't contract into a fear or into a smallness. They're expanding, and then eventually they expand into love, and often they'll expand into joy. And if you're walking into a house of people who feel like that, and you're coming in with your, oh, I'm so sorry, then that's not helpful to them, and it's not helpful to you, because you're not appreciating what's in front of you and who those people are. So the other one that gets quite topical is holding space. So especially here where we live on the North Coast, some of us, you know, people often bandy that term about without actually understanding what they mean by it. So generally I'm using the phrase I sit with, I be with, I accompany, I walk with them, and we are co-creating that experience together. Because this, when you're looking at me, when you're listening to me, when you're feeling the quality of what I'm sharing with you, it's very sustainable. And you know, as Christina is my witness, you know, I haven't, even though I've changed because I've learned so much, my life energy, my vital life energy, my vibrancy hasn't changed, even though I've spent 35 years on that coalface with dying people. I'm still very, you know, very, I don't even know what the word is, but anyway, you can work that out, but here I am. So holding space for people can be very exhausting. And it's also, if you're sitting with someone who's dying, if you think you're holding space for them when they're actually dying and you're not, that I would say that is sort of disrespectful to them, because you're not leaving behind a partner, small children, you know, a life that you've loved. You're not in a suffering body, and so you're accompanying them, and you're co-creating that experience with them. But I would try to dissuade you from the concept of holding space. It's up to you, but I'm just trying to be helpful. And with that goes the concept of giving someone permission to die. Again, I don't know if that's helpful, and you're encouraging, or you're inviting, or you're behaving in the very best way you can to accompany them in that dying experience. And I've been saying that for many years, and just last week I was with someone and they said to me, you know, I was with my dad when he was dying, and I said, it's okay, Dad, you know, I'm give you permission to go. And the dad had dementia, and he turned to the son and he said, it's not that easy, mate. And you know, and so he did die a couple of days later, but and the son, who's, you know, my age, he just said it was the father was so lucid where he hadn't been lucid at all. So I said, that is a great story. The next time I get to tell people that point, I'm going to tell them that story. So, but some people won't be able to respond like that. But it's sort of, you can only imagine yourselves, if you were dying and someone was sitting there who wasn't dying, said to you, yeah, I'm giving you permission to go, you might not take that so well. Anyway, because if you're, you know, if you're doing your best, you don't need someone, it's not anybody else's business to give you permission to die, you know, it's yours. So that's sort of useful. And the other two things are the using especially if you're creating ceremony or you're sitting with the people, the family, is unbearable and unimaginable. Now, they don't have to imagine it because it's happening to them. Their partner, their children are dying or have died. And so to use the phrase around them, unimaginable, I can't imagine how you're feeling, you know, it's just not the kindest use of words. And unbearable, well, they have to bear it or die. It's sort of that simple. So, and some people do die because of that. They're heartbroken and they die. Some people choose to kill themselves. because the person that they love has died and they can't bear to live on without them. And that is the definition of unbearable. If you can't bear it, you opt out. But otherwise, they're going to have to learn to live with that loss, to live with that pain. And it's who they are. And they're living, you know, they are the mother or they are the father of a dead child. They are a widow or a widower. They're, you know, and it's like a sort of scar that they have on the inside because they don't have a badge saying, you know, my mum just died, my dad just died, my partner died. It's like a scar, or it's like a sort of tattoo that you might have, but you choose whether you share that with people or not. And people are much more likely to share with you how they feel, really how they feel, if they can trust you, if they can feel you, that you are present to them. And you know, you've had 21 lessons in this. You're reading the book. You know, you're Buddhists to start off with. You should be, you know, beautiful people to be with if you were dying. You know, like I would love to have some of you at my bedside, those friends that I can see in the picture. And it's that, you know, it's that lightness of being that you want to bring into the room. It's that expanded love that you want to sit next to someone. Because imagine if it was you wouldn't want someone solemn coming into the room. You would want someone, you know, holding ground for themselves and coming into that space, that bedroom, to be with, or the roadside, to, you know, to, in kindness. We all know what kindness feels like. And so the last one, I don't know, how are we going for time?
When you do the last one, then we'll talk about what we do next, how we fit it in.
Yeah. So the last one, which you won't be with people who are doing this, but the common phrase is that people commit suicide, or the latest terminology around that is dying by suicide. But I would, as people, you know, as Buddhists, as practitioners, again, I would invite you to think on this, that what that means is sui means oneself and side means to kill. So what you're saying is they killed themselves, but you're just saying it in a different language. And the whole language around that commit suicide is when it was a crime. So it was, you know, if you succeeded in committing suicide, you were dead. If you failed an attempt to commit suicide, you would then be arrested, tried, and maybe imprisoned. And, you know, that's an appalling state of affairs. So for many years, I've dissolved that phrase out of my language, and I started by saying they ended their own life. Not they took their own life, but they ended their own life. And I do that because I can see that it assists the people who live on in their healing, in accepting the reality of what has happened without slapping them around with that reality. They're in it. So when I'm speaking from a place of kindness and neutrality, I'm saying they ended their own life. But now, and for probably about the last 10 years, I've said they killed themselves, which may seem a bit harsh to you, and it may be harsh, especially if someone close to you has ended their own life. But I do it when I'm the celebrant at the ceremony, and I do it at the kitchen table, because I can see that it actually helps them in their bereavement. So it might seem a bit shocking for you. It might not be language that you're able to use, but you could say they ended their own life, because the counterbalance to that is the phrase commit suicide. It's a dead zone, you know, no pun intended. It's sort of, it doesn't help people in their process of recovery or of healing. So I'm going to stop there, but I'm trusting that somewhere in all of that, something might be helpful for you.
It was very helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So the two things, Zenith, that I had down to continue with were to play the part of the doco with Peter, so that's about 6 minutes, but also to talk about self-care. We're at 6:16. I think we can do both, and we might go over a little bit if that's okay. Yeah? Or we can just keep having this conversation and not play the doco. What do you think?
Well, why don't you do a show of hands?
Oh, hold on. Hold on. Let me...
Well, all they have to do is go like this.
No, I can't see them until I put it on a gallery.
Oh, I see. I'm looking at everyone.
Yeah, I can't see. Okay, so we have a fabulous, not that I want to upsell because I'm enjoying speaking with you as well. We have like a 7-minute segment which follows a husband and wife and children through his death process and who's involved with that and how it all comes together. So we can do that and also have conversation. So let's put the hand up. Do we want to do the doco? Are people happy to go over a little bit? I like going over a little bit. I'm just going to keep checking. Going across. We've got hands up. Some people aren't putting their hands up because they're hiding. So from what I can see, there's hands up. So let's keep going, yeah? Okay, fantastic. That was not that...
Keep going with what?
We're going to do the doco and keep talking.
Right,
We're going
okay.
to do everything.
Okay, I'm going to read the chat box while you watch the doco.
Fantastic. Yes, so if people want to pop something in the chat box as we're going along, please do. And Nicolette, if you can play this segment. And it starts off with Dr. Joanne, a palliative care specialist, because I'm not sure if that will come up. Thank you.
I've looked after thousands of people who have been facing death and preparing for death. And do you know what? Very, very ordinary people every day do this. And they do it beautifully and in their own style. But people do manage. And I hope that's a comforting thought.
The first time we met Joanne, she treated Peter like, not like a man who was dying, she treated Peter like a human being who was living out the fullness of his life. And I was so taken by that. And she was very respectful of our desire to die at home.
Hello. Often it's not medical things that keep patients in hospital. It's often social things. And it's that whole social support. Because there's 3 changes of nursing shifts in a 24-hour period, but if you've just got one person, it's a lot. It's a lot to ask.
I don't know what the bigger picture holds or why, and if you are to die from this, and I don't understand why, but...
And this is how this journey is. that the intensity of facing these huge life questions and events, and then there are the young children who keep us really in the moment.
I did utilize the 24-hour palliative care service. I did make calls and ask questions about medications, or this is happening now, what do you think? We did utilize the community nurses coming in a couple of times a day and helping us bathe Peter and so forth. And so we utilized all those services, but being able to do it in the comfort of our own home gave us a greater sense of fulfillment and comfort. So I had very good interactions with the medical system here in Australia, and it didn't bankrupt me. And I know that if we had done everything we did in America, including all the complementary therapy and alternative therapies plus the medicine, I probably would be bankrupt. I had never watched a body shut down before slowly. That was my beloved husband, my lover, and to watch his body transform and start to shut down was really confronting, actually. I had a conversation with Joanne about that, and we went into a staff room or something, and I just burst into tears and said, "This isn't beautiful. This is not beautiful at all, and what can I do? And this is really hard, and I feel like I'm failing Peter." And she was so great at just really helping me reframe beauty. And she talked about it in terms of the presence that we were bringing to the moment, to the realness that we were bringing to the moment, to the love that was obvious between us and around us. And I was so grateful to her for that, because that really helped me kind of resource myself and be able to really then be present for Peter and the situation as it was rather than as I thought it should be. People have asked me what our last conversations were, and because we had conversation all the way through, in the end, really all that was left to say in the end was thank you and I love you, and that really was it. The fact that we kept Peter home overnight and that we took care of washing his body and dressing him and all of that ourselves the next day, the feeling in our home really was like that feeling in a home after a new birth. It was so peaceful. It was so peaceful in the room, and the children got to sit in that peace. Being able to say something like, let's feel our heartbeats, feel how you can feel the rhythm of the heart, and our skin is warm, and and all of that in circulation. And now, let's put our hand on Papa's chest. You see, his heart's not beating anymore, and he's taken off his earth coat, and he's dead now. He's died. That kind of reality check, I think, helps them get, what does it mean, this thing, death? A number of people approached me at the end of Peter's funeral or in the days after, saying that it had really touched them to see the children there, to see them actually touching Peter's body, to see them sitting on the
For what is it to die, but to stand naked in the wind and to melt into the sun? And what is it to cease breathing, but to free the breath from its restless tides, that it may rise and expand and seek God unencumbered?
I just thought, wow, if I didn't know Zenith and I hadn't had Joanne's help, I would have just had to open the phone directory and find a funeral director, and I would have just called whatever funeral director looked okay and said, tell me what to do, tell me where to sign.
Put your hands under Mama's hands. Okay, bird. Let's set him free. Chloe, ready? Go! Tell Papa!
Knowing me, if that had been how it had gone down, I probably would have felt emotionally ripped off and probably financially ripped off as well. And so that was the catalyst for me to think, wow, we need to know what our options are, and we need to be supported in making the right choice for us, and that can look like a whole range of things for different people.
Wow.
And there is courage, courage and capacity, and children. You've got it all.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so extraordinary.
Yeah, yeah. And so many different parties involved together and just weaving in and out and doing what needed to be done. Just beautiful. I feel really such a gift that they were happy to have that footage shared and part of the film. Special. So if there's nothing else to be said about that, because that was amazing in itself, let's move to self-care, which I know some of the crazy Buddhist friends that I have don't seem to be so good at. So anything you can say about self-care when it comes to the person who's dying, self-care for them, the person who's looking after them, and also someone like yourself or us that are going in and out of environments, because it's sort of slightly different for everyone. But yeah, how to maintain self-care, or what does it look like, or how do you do it? Anything on that topic.
So I'm just going to try and be concise. So what I would say is, as an absolute, you need to be as kind to yourself as you are to others. Because I hazard a guess that most of the people here are probably very good at being kind to others, but you have to be as kind to yourself as you are to others, because it is unsustainable to keep giving and giving and giving on empty. And part of what's so attractive about being with dying people is you are in the profound. You're dancing in the profound, and it's very seductive, and it can be like a drug where you want more and more, because you really know you're alive when someone else is dying. And so you need, it's better to prevent it rather than try and cure it, as you all know. So coming present, neutral, not merging with the family, not taking on their suffering, thinking you're being a good Buddhist if you're there, totally merging with them. It is not helpful. And there are a couple of things that people said to me right at the beginning, which I found very helpful. One is, if you take on someone else's suffering, you're depriving them of their suffering, and you're doubling the suffering in the world. And you could put the word grief in there. If you take on someone else's grief, you're doubling it, and you're depriving them of it, because we don't know what their karma is. We don't know what it is they're going to learn from that. So we're trying not to interfere. So pay attention and listen to what your body is telling you, what some of you might call intuition, what I would call deep knowing, because your body will try to speak to you and say, warning, rest, don't go, take time out, go and sit by the ocean. Like, don't keep giving and giving, because if you give on empty, there's usually a price for that. So again, I mean, you may or may not like me, but this is what good self-care looks like. It's light, it's able to hold it all, but not take it on. And in order to work with death and dying, you don't have to be fully immersed and take it and merge with the people. It's disrespectful to them. And I also feel to say this because, I've done the Tonglen practice. I've sat with many teachers in my youth, not so much of late. But if you are sitting at the bedside of someone and you are practicing Tonglen, unless you have really got it, you need to be very careful about, taking in their suffering and breathing out loving kindness, unless you are very good at transforming. You are very good at that middle step, because what you do not want to be left with is is a residue of their suffering. And I see it quite often where the partner of the person they've been nursing gets sick after that person has died, because they've neglected their own health and care, and they haven't been paying attention to themselves. And so if that is you in some situation, don't. Just don't take on their suffering. It's not yours, it's theirs, and it's part of some great mystery. And you don't want to pay a price for accompanying others in that realm, unless you do, and then off you go. But I'm wanting to be fully alive. I work with the dying. I don't want to be a dying person till it's my time, whatever that looks like. So, have a balance. Don't think you're irreplaceable. Take time for yourself, and don't get sucked into the profoundness of the work or the role. You're in the profound, but your place in that is not. You're just, anybody can do this work. It's not, it's not important. You're not important in that role. I'm trying not to explain anything, which is probably not so helpful. But know what your boundaries are, because especially if it's someone in your family that you're caring for, their only job is to die. Their only job is to die as well as they can. But if you are accompanying them, you still have to go on. You have to deal with the emotional response to their death. You have to feel it all fully. But then you have to organize a ceremony. You have to organize a cremation or a burial. You have to deal with an onslaught of other people and their emotions. And then you have to go back into your own life without that person in it. So your job doesn't finish when they die, it continues. And you want to keep something in reserve for that next part, rather than, investing it all in that dying person. They're going to die. Do your best, but look after yourself at the same time, and do things that feed you, that nourish you, that replenish you. Eat chocolate, go to the beach, spend time in nature, have a glass of wine, put your feet up, watch a trashy TV, whatever is restful for you, and don't give yourself a hard time thinking, oh my God, I should be looking after them. How dare I take time for myself? How dare I go and get a massage and be indulgent when they're dying? Do it, because that will feed them. If it feeds you, it will support them. And the other thing is, don't stay in the room 24/7, because some people, as I say, like me, will be busy dying. And you all heard all the stories about, everybody leaves the room and then the person dies. It's so common. And that person, whatever magic is happening for them in their death. So, give them some alone time, unless they're desperate that they want you there all the time. And then don't give yourself a hard time for missing that death or not for being there. Just trust it's all perfect as it is, even if it's painful. Love them in their suffering. Wish them well, because their suffering is sometimes something you can't change, but you have to be able to not take that on. So good boundaries are your best help in those situations. I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to stop there.
You've given us so much, really. It's just fantastic. Can we look in the chat or the comments to see if there's anything that needs to be addressed? Have you read these, Zenith?
I read some of them till the film, and then.
Okay. Someone's asking, do you sometimes travel to accompany people who are dying in other states of Australia?
Well, yes and no, but I talk to a lot of people on the phone, and really in those circumstances, I'm supporting the people who are supporting the person.
Yeah.
So, but you've got Annie Whitlock in amongst you, who is just such a wonderful resource for you. Has so much experience and love to share. Never mind giggles and smiles. you know. So, you know, you won't need me. You've got her. So, but I talked, you know, I'm happy to talk to people on the phone, that's for sure. So
the person's saying how to get in touch, so I was just
easy to find. I'm just going to address Anna's thing, which is people fearful of disease or germs, or do you mean like if they've got cancer and it's open wounds, that sort of thing? Right. So you know, you just take reasonable precautions. So, for example, I never wear gloves when I'm touching a dead body. I don't feel that or a dying person. You know, I'm not, I have to say, I'm not a big hand washer either. I'm a reasonable hand washer. I'm not, because, you know, I lived through the HIV era with lots of my friends dying with HIV. You know, I held them, I kissed them, you know, I washed them. I wasn't concerned, but I think again, you need to know what your boundaries are. So if that's something you need to do to feel safe and to be able to continue to give, then you have to do what's right for you. But you don't need to be terrified. You need to speak to the medical people, and they'll give you clear instruction of whether you need to take any precaution or not, and then it will be up to you. But I have to say, in all that time, I've never worn gloves for anybody alive, dying, or dead so far. What else is there? Is that okay, Annie?
Perfect.
Yeah, so I've just spent the last 10 years, I've spent 25 years teaching, but I've just spent the last 10 years teaching quite intensively, which is what Zangmo came to, in person as a 3-day workshop. And because I've got such fantastic self-care, I am stopping and taking a year off, and I'm going all over the world having a great time. And so I've just filmed all my teachings and put them online, and they're broken down into being with and caring for the dying, or being a celebrant, if that's what you want to do. And so they're online available. So wherever you are, they're much more condensed, obviously, because otherwise I'm raving on like a lunatic. It's very different when you've got people in front of you, and I'm very responsive to who's in front of me, obviously. So I wasn't so exciting in front of the camera, but I was still giving it my best. So that's all there as a body of work for people to access. And if you're in New Zealand, there's one more in New Zealand, or in the Czech Republic. That's it.
For those wanting to travel.
Well, some people might be, you know, in Europe. Oh no, they're sold out. The only one that's left is the New Zealand one. Okay. Anyway, I think that's it.
All right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it with the column. That's what I mean.
So I haven't yet acknowledged Brodie Fox for letting us actually use the doco as part of this session. So many thanks to him for being so generous. And if people would like to watch the full documentary, it's Zen and the Art of Dying. It's on Vimeo. But if you Google Zenith Virago, all of her bits will come up. So there's the the book that she co-authored. There's a TED talk, there's the training, and then there's the link to the film. So, and also how to contact her. She's very, very accessible. Thank you.
I've got great boundaries.
Exactly, you've got great boundaries. Thank you so much, Zenith. It's been a joy. I'm sure we could, you know, do a few more sessions, but I think we've just covered so much in one session. It's been incredibly inspiring. I just thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Just gorgeous. And good luck with your year off face-to-face teaching and doing whatever you decide to do. I think, yeah, they're putting the website in the chat box. I think the chat box, I need to read that. Oh, and in the resources, we have a resource file, so it will all be there. So now we need to dedicate.
Can I just say one thing?
Please.
Can I just say, if you can possibly, at the end of this, not rush off and do what you would normally do, unless you've got children or something you have to, is to just maybe sit for a while and just let some of that settle in you, so that it lands more, and maybe write anything down, but just let to get the most of it, let it feel it, let it be embodied, so that when you get up to move from there, you feel that you've got it and it's of assistance to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we dedicate together and hope that the ripples of all of that can go far and wide. This virtuous accumulation of merit we offer so that all obstacles dissolve, and that at the time of our death each of us may find ease in dying and swift rebirth in the pure land of great bliss, quickly gaining enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. If the material presented today has raised any concerns for you, it's suggested you speak to a trusted friend, your personal health professional, or your Buddhist teacher or instructor, or contact Zenith, because she is very contactable. So next week, the session is Songsa Khyentse Rinpoche's advice about what to say to a dying person, and this will be facilitated by Sering and Kirsten. We look forward to seeing you then. Thanks again, Zenith. Wonderful. Truly wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Zenith.
Thank you, Zenith.
Yeah, thank you, Zenith.
Thank you, Zenith.
Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
everyone.
Thank you, Izamo.
So helpful.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to end the meeting.
All right.